Welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you in online and print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube and all those other social medias. Today, we have what is probably a lot of people's most anticipated film of the year, just as far as anything that we've seen footage for, trailers for, that's not a comic book property or something like that. Today, we're talking Civil War, which since the first trailer dropped, every time I have seen the trailer for that movie in theaters with people, the crowd is always pretty divisive, just like this movie's going to be. Some people are like, yeah, no, that hits way too close to home, in the same way that when I see the Twister previews, I'm sure people who live in the Midwest who have experienced that watch that Twister trailer and are probably like, yeah, no, don't need that at all because I've lived through that. That's, or the notes is horrifying. Why would I want to live through that? So Civil War, just to get into the basics, this is a near future dystopian America where, at some point, multiple states have seceded from the United States. Something has happened with the president. And the movie, unfortunately, is just a little bit too vague on the reasoning by some of this happening. It doesn't go into detail and tell you exactly why did these states secede, what happened here. We're kind of thrown into this story somewhere in the middle, somewhere like 15 months after, Texas and California have kind of formed their own union. You've got the Florida Alliance. You've got some of the middle of the country in the Northwest area who are all a part of their own. But essentially, you have all of these different states that have seceded from the U.S. The president, played by Nick Offerman, is pleading, trying to get these people to come back. You'll be welcome back to the United States. Let's stop the violence. And where we're thrown into this, we're watching cities that you're probably familiar with, from New York to LA, major cities where you're seeing eruptions of violence, some peaceful protests, some people who were lining up just to get food, some people who are trying to help others out. And then you've got other people who have their own set of beliefs and ideologies who are coming in, trying to disrupt that peace, trying to cause trouble, trying to inflict pain and death upon people. From the get-go, this movie is pretty relentless. Alex Garland, the director, you may be familiar with him from Ex Machina, Annihilation, did Men a couple years ago, but he wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later, for Sunshine, The Beach. Typically dabbles sci-fi. That's usually his bread and butter, I would say. He did a TV show called Devs, which is pretty fascinating for FX. But this is him going more inward. This is looking a lot more inward at what's happening in our country currently, at where it could be taken. I don't know how to talk about this film without kind of rambling, so excuse me for kind of jumping all around and talking some about plot, some about how the movie makes you feel, because I would not describe this film as entertaining. I think it's a crucial watch. I think it is, engrossing in a lot of ways. You feel like you were embedded in this action. You feel like you were caught in the midst of this turmoil and all of this violence and confusion that's going on in the United States. And so you're following a set of journalists. Kirsten Dunst is a war photographer and journalist by the name of Lee. You've got Wagner Moura, who plays Joel, another press kind of journalist, pal of hers. Essentially, the two of them are trying to make their way to Washington, D.C., because that's where they suspect that the forces of California and Texas are going to be advancing to take the White House, hopefully get the president. They want to interview the president. They want to try to get him on record. They also want to document what's happening for the rest of the world, for the country to see. And very early on, they make a quote just kind of discussing this kind of work, because Kirsten Dunst's character, you're kind of introduced to her background through a quick series of flashbacks of her embedded in other wars in other countries, just photographing brutal and horrific violence, murder, torture. And this is where Alex Garland, he does not pull any punches. You see a lot of really twisted, horrific stuff. And at the core of it is just the evil side of human nature and what people are capable of doing, because in their heart of hearts, they are cruel and evil. Um, so, you understand that she has been doing this for a long time. In the beginning, I felt worried because it's like she's so unfazed by what's happening. But when you understand what she's been through, and this idea of not only being a war photographer, but a journalist during this time of war, you were tasked with reporting, and it's really difficult. You kind of have to remain neutral because you were there to photograph, you were there to observe and report. And they kind of make this quote, or they kind of talk about the fact that, we're just here to record what happens. The morality of it, people can debate that afterwards, but that's what comes after we've taken these pictures, or after we have kind of delivered this information to the public. They're the ones that have the emotional response. It's up to them to decide what's moral, what's not moral. And it really sets a tone early on. That was a little concerning, maybe just in terms of like, I don't know what we're about to witness. And somewhere partway through the story, a couple other journalists tag along with them. You've got Kaylee Spaney, who's hot off Priscilla. Just great performance in that movie. Kind of playing a younger journalist here. She's new to this field. She kind of knows who Kirsten Dunst is. She knows a little bit about her background, but she has never been in a war. She's never been in a war setting where she is risking her life as well to photograph, to document, to take these important photos. And clearly Kirsten Dunst does not want to be the motherly, trying to let me bring this young one along. But they almost unfortunately get stuck together. And then you've also got Stephen McKinley Henderson, who plays kind of an older, weathered reporter, can't get around nearly as quickly, which the film, doesn't hold back on discussing, especially in terms of where these people are going to be going, the firefights that they're going to be encountering along their way. His character Sammy wants to go along with them. He knows that he can't go on his own, doesn't want to be with any of these other people, these press people that he doesn't know. And so the four of them set out to head towards Washington, D.C. And along their travels is kind of where you peel back the onion and the layers of what's happened in our country. You're seeing the lack of politics, I would say, which is something that people have kind of criticized this film for. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But as you're moving through the country, there's no Republicans, there's no Democrats, there's no centralists, there's no whatever. This is a war-tattered country now, which is hard for people, I think, in America to imagine. Just reading a lot of people's reactions to this film has been fascinating for a number of reasons, because I think, like I was saying earlier, it hits a little too close to home for people, and it can be pretty frightening and scary because we might be headed in a direction that could lead towards this. But I think the film serves more as a cautionary tale. But remaining apolitical has bugged some people because, Grace Randolph on Twitter was just going off about, oh, you've got liberals who are killing people. This is just going to add fuel to the fire. That's a great look, trying to twist things around as if you couldn't have people on both sides who are just as dangerous, as spewing as much vitriol as they can. And so the film, it doesn't bother in that. It looks at what happens as a whole, because, we are many states comprised of one nation. And when the government has collapsed, when the people have revolted, when people are tasked with taking care of themselves, that's a pretty scary thought. And the idea of, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, that goes out the window. Are you friendly? You're my neighbor. Are you going to help out? Do you care to contribute to this new commune we're being a part of, or we have to kind of create? Are you going to be someone who chooses to try to lead with fear and violence and intimidation? The situation just transcends politics, beliefs of, morality, unfortunately, is almost thrown out of the window because we are animals at our core. Human nature kicks in, and that survival instinct kicks in. And I think we've seen it a lot in films that make people uncomfortable, the lengths that people are willing to go to protect their families, to protect their loved ones, to protect themselves. When it is you or someone else, you know, the animal inside you, the instinct inside you says, it's me, I'm protecting me at any cost. And there's a lot of jarring moments in this movie, just filled with horrific violence or bursts of death that are hard to process, but are so dispassionate because of the circumstances. Garland cleverly uses music, I think, in certain disarming tactics as he shows you a lot of pretty horrific stuff. Um, it's not a spoiler. There's just one moment as they're passing through an area after we've watched something really heavy, and there's a highway underpass they're driving through, and you can clearly see that there's two bodies hanging from that underpass, dead bodies that are hanging there as a warning. But up above them, spray painted in graffiti, says Steelers. And the whole audience, including myself, kind of chuckled when we saw that. And then you look down and you're like, oh God, like, wow, that humor, that whatever that light moment was, though, kind of helps you process a little bit of what you're seeing or make it a little more digestible. And there's moments where what they're showing or what you would be hearing is so awful that they're going to be playing, a musical cue comes in. And it's a song that you would never expect for the scene that totally disarms you as, you're watching what's happening in the film take place with this loud score over it. And you're watching horrific things again, but the music is almost like a barrier that kind of helps you process it a little bit better rather than it just being 100% horrifying what you're watching. And that's something Alex Garland, I mean, he, since Ex Machina, loves to play with music, and he loves to play with eerie and creepy sounds that just are so unsettling, almost like vibrations. Whatever instruments and tools he's using, there's moments throughout the film where it's like a humming or droning as you're inside these tight corners with soldiers actively looking to kill other people in that building. There's so many suspenseful moments in this film. The audio, it's just so alarming sometimes as well. The mixing on it, it's fantastic. I saw it in IMAX, which is how I would recommend people go see this film, specifically for that sound design. This was loud like Tenet was in IMAX. Every gunshot, every tank, helicopter, blade whirring, everything in this film, you hear and you feel as if you're there. And I think that really adds to the severity, the urgency, the scale of what's going on in this film when you're just seeing hundreds of helicopters and army vehicles and listening to them all take off, headed for the same destination when you're in the middle of a firefight, either out somewhere in the country or somewhere deep in the city. It's all the same. It is terrifying. It's loud. Gunshots come out of nowhere. I mean, there were so many times in the movie where I just jumped in my seat and was just so afraid of what was coming next, because you really never know. And as they move through these different states, obviously you have assumptions about what things may look like. You drive past small town gas stations that got, militia members standing outside, and you need to weigh, do we get gas or do we keep moving? Is this worth the potential conflict? Or, when is the next time we're going to get fuel? There's so many things that your mind is focused on. So I'm like, and this is just what bugs me a little bit about how people are talking about this movie, or how they wanted it to be more political, or to choose a side, or to have something to say about America. And I really do think it has a lot to say about America. Um, it oh, it not choosing sides is specifically what it needed to do, I think, to tell the story effectively, because that is a more accurate representation of what's happening in our society today. Being in the Seattle area, when I watched the movie, one of the first things that popped into my mind during some of the early scenes of the film was back during, what was it, 2020? I think, yeah, probably 2020. The Chaz Chop situation, if you're familiar, in Seattle, there was a portion of the town, downtown, where people essentially kicked out the police, the government forces, state forces, whomever. They pushed all these people out They cordoned off an area of however many city blocks and said, this is, the Republic of Chaz or whatever the hell it was called. And, it's going to be a commune and we're going to feed people here. And we've got gardens and we've got all these things. We'll take care of people. They don't have to worry about going through the cops for things. They don't have to worry about going to an actual hospital. We have people and caretakers here. It's a safe space for people just passing through. And as well intended as the idea may have been, also understanding that, there's a ton of businesses who were in the middle of all this, who it's kind of like, if you didn't get in line, F you. And there was tons of, there was violence, there were riots. Obviously, you sent people in, police officers were sent in at multiple times trying to get people out of there. It was fighting back. And in the movie, you often see, so many of these peaceful things that, again, start well intended. All it takes is a couple horrible people to start retaliating, to start throwing things at the police, to start shoving. The police start attacking, and you've got everybody fighting. You've got people being beaten. It escalates so quickly throughout the 2 weeks that happened there. Businesses were being broken into. People were having to lock them up. A buddy of mine who's got a shoe shop downtown, like a shoe boutique store downtown, posted signs like, there's nothing in here. Please don't take anything. We were a small black-owned business. Please, there is nothing in the store for you here. People still shot it up. People still threw things through the windows, tried to break things down. And it sucks because that's kind of what the narrative then obviously turned into, because things got violent. 2 people, I believe, ended up dying during that 2-week period. There was a whole conundrum where, police officers and first responders could not get to this person quickly enough to help save them because people were blocking them off because they're not helpful, yada, yada, yada. And it just, some of this has already happened today in our society. And so watching this movie, again, we've seen extremism on both sides. And we've seen that despite how well-intended or patriotic or whatever people might think they're being, violence and vitriol and the way that certain people handle things, it has already caused so much degradation in our society. The two-party system has already caused enough of that as well, because we're coming up on a crucial election where it feels like we have 2 bad options. And I'm sorry if people are offended by that, but it's the craziest thing when even the most staunch defenders of whether Trump or Biden come around and say, oh yeah, you know what, actually they haven't done enough here. They haven't done enough here. And what I'm reading from my circles, from America or whatever, is a lot of this division is caused because people feel like they have to pick a side and everything is relegated to you are this or you are that. And in this film, none of that matters, because when shit hits the fan, none of that matters. At the end of the day, we are the citizens that make up the country. And that's where, again, I wish the film would have spoken a little bit more to some of the conflict that caused this. It's something to the effect of the president disbands the FBI. This president gets a 3rd term in office. So already there is cause for American citizens on any side of the aisle to be upset about what's happening to their liberties, to their freedoms. We know Americans are very opinionated. We know we take our freedoms very seriously. And so I thought this film was a fairly truthful reflection of what could happen. And I thought it was better for the fact that it didn't just say, oh no, one side's responsible for this, or the crazy Texans are responsible, or the liberals from California are doing this. Those 2 states have 2 of the largest economies in the world. So, and when people are like, oh, it doesn't make sense that those 2 teams or those 2 states would link up like that, opposing ideologies. Again, when you have more wealth and people between those 2 places, which I'm sure is going to be compromised by a government that keeps meddling and changing the Constitution and things, I think people are probably going to feel pretty united on the fact that, no, this is not what we agree on. This is not what this country stands for. And so, yeah, as far as retaliation against the government, there's a lot of money in Texas and there's a lot of money in California. So that doesn't feel unrealistic to me. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that the film doesn't take time to get into everything that's happened in the country, why we're here. We're just observing, we're following these journalists, and it's horrific every step of the way because you see how society can collapse so quickly, how quickly people turn on each other. And again, it's an uncomfortable topic. It's something that I think people are afraid of. This is why I think, I don't know, I am more drawn to films that take things seriously, the stakes, the settings. Obviously, my superhero movies, Man of Steel, to this day, we feel the implications. I just seen some post by someone online talking about, can we stop doing the whole thing where we're like, the city's been evacuated, so now we can destroy it, or now something can crash there because people don't want innocent civilians to die. And of course, nobody wants innocent people to die. But the reality is, that's not life. Unfortunately, horrible things happen to good people or to unsuspecting people. And to try to please every crowd and say, like, oh no, like, don't worry, even the smallest mouse made it out of there unharmed, don't worry. We wouldn't do that. No animals were harmed in the filming of this. It's great. And that's why some people go to movies, because they're fantastical and it's an escapism. I prefer both. I prefer the escapism, but I don't ever mind having a very truthful or realistic and grounded feeling film that makes you feel things that might be uncomfortable, because as citizens and humans, there's so much that we do need to confront and we need to be comfortable talking about. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going down a slippery slope of division, and that's not going to get us anywhere. So I could not recommend Civil War enough to people. Again, it's not entertaining. You're not going to leave feeling like, oh man, that was freaking awesome. Like, that was badass. That's not the sentiment that I think you'll come away with. And I remember when the film was originally reported to be 3 hours, I was stoked, especially after seeing pictures or footage. And then people were like, oh, it's actually 2 hours. And I was like, oh, I'm bummed, because I was looking forward to a really cool war action dystopian movie. But seeing the film now and knowing what we got, I'm glad it wasn't any longer than it was. It didn't need to be, to effectively get the message across. I think if there was any more action and violence, I think that just would have been overboard, because I think what we see does the job so well that, for days now, I can't stop thinking about this movie. I wrote 1,300 words about this movie before recording this, just because I was like, I got to get my thoughts down. I can't talk about it with some people, because some people have had a totally different reaction than I have. And it's been interesting, again, to read both sides. I think, personally, this is a great film. I think, I've seen a lot of people say it's dumb, it's stupid, it shouldn't have been set in America, all kinds of stuff. And I think that I don't agree with that. And I, would hope that you make up your own decision when watching it as well. But I think if you look inside a little bit deeper, if you understand human nature and human beings to a degree, a realistic degree, this film, while still a dystopia, could totally happen. And again, I don't need to be told exactly what happened and why these two things had to team up. This is the movie we got. And, as we follow it, we start to learn more and piece things together about what's happened since that 15 months or so. So Civil War, see it in IMAX. Just be aware, it's pretty jarring stuff. They use that R rating, but Alex Garland is such a thought-provoking director. Anything he does, I will be there for. I think his perspective is just so unique. He assembled a terrific cast here. Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney are fantastic, playing, I don't want to say the old and weathered war photographer, because Kirsten Dunst is not old, nor does she look old. But you can see how much of herself she kind of sees in Spaney's younger character, for better and for worse, because you have to be so disassociated from emotion to do the job that they do. And that's the other thing, again, if it is wartime, which we in America, again, have not been privy to recently, other than fighting a civil war back when we had another different skirmishes and wars before the nation reached the 21st century. I mean, it's just, we are so fortunate to not experience what so much of the world has gone through. And again, maybe it looks odd at first and it feels like, well, that's not really realistic. We don't know anything. That could be very well what happens here. And so I think telling this story in America at this time, I think is necessary. Some people have said this film is harmful and it's going to hurt more than it's going to help. If anything, I would hope that it would just spark conversation. And hopefully that's what it's doing, because in my circles it is. Hopefully it does in yours. I'll stop rambling though. If you want some more concise thoughts on this film and you don't totally, like, I don't know, if you want to continue this conversation, you could read some of my thoughts at nicktiffany.com. There's a little bit in there that I probably didn't cover here just because I'm not trying to take all your time up here with this podcast. But this is a worthwhile film, and it's one I think that's going to sit with people for a really, really long time. Definitely going to be popping up on some end of the year lists, I'm sure, because filmmakers aren't making movies like Alex Garland is. Whether you like him or hate him, it is filmmaking on another level. The fact that he can create a horror film out of this war genre is astounding and incredibly effective. So thank you again for tuning in. Check out NT Movie Reviews on all social media networks, podcast platforms, and even on YouTube for all the latest on movie news and reviews. We'll catch you next time. We got a lot of good stuff coming out soon, and we got the Seattle International Film Festival on the horizon, so I'm stoked. There's going to be a lot of great things I'm excited to share, and we'll see you next time.